I'll accept it. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a good one to have. I do need it. I think I've added. I don't know. All right. So let's pick up where we left off. We're finishing up 1942, and in 1942, how would you say the war is going for the United States? Well or good in the Pacific?
Pretty bad.
Pretty bad. Yeah, it's going pretty bad. So as a result, the Japanese pushed their way through into the Solomon Islands, which is a series of 1,000 small islands right off the coast of Australia. If they are able to take these islands, one of which is an island called Guadalcanal, they will be able to set up an airstrip which will allow them to strike the shipping lanes to Australia. Now, why is that important? Jason.
Cuts off supplies.
Cuts off supplies to Australia, which remember, that's where MacArthur went when he had to vacate the Philippines. So what happens is, if that occurs, we will be in danger of losing Australia. So, we hear that the Japanese, or we discover that the Japanese are building an airstrip on Guadalcanal. We then in turn invade to take this from them, and the Battle of Guadalcanal begins on August 7th, 1942. Once we do, Japan becomes enraged that they have lost it because we take the airstrip, and they begin pouring troops in through this area right here, the Savo Island Sound. And as they come in through this area, we are going to be able to sink many of their ships. It's going to be known by the Navy as the Tokyo Express because it seems like they are sending so many in. It's a non-stop one-way ticket to death. It's also going to be known as Iron Bottle Bay because by the time it is over, 32 ships will have been sunk in this area. Now, at Guadalcanal, something that has been building to a head all this time is going to make itself known, and it is going to be revealed to be completely wrong. See, all this time, the Japanese have been telling all their soldiers that they are superior in thought, word, and deed, and in fact that they are infused with a spiritual energy that allows them to defeat that one of them can defeat 12 Americans. So, at Guadalcanal, getting a little bit tipsy on sake, a Japanese commander leads a banzai charge, which is basically his men and his he and his men without rifles, swords, on a banzai charge. They scream, "Banzai!" and they run. And they believe that just because they are superior and have this spiritual energy, they will be able to defeat the Americans that they are attacking. However, the Marines that they are attacking have something that disagrees with them, and that is known as a machine gun. They attack at night, and the next morning, when the attack finally comes to an end, they get out, and the Marines get out, and they look around, and they see that they had killed over 1,000 Japanese soldiers. 1,000 participated in this one banzai charge. You think they learned their lesson, but it goes on. These banzai charges continue to go on through up to the Battle of Iwo Jima, when they start realizing maybe this isn't a good idea. The Marines are going to be able to secure Guadalcanal in February of 1943, some of the heaviest fighting in the war. Now, that is the end of 1942. In 1943, this is what we have. Up to 1943, the United States has lost 29 ships and suffered 7,000 casualties. We have had 600 planes shot down. However, in that exact same time period, we have sent 5 new carriers, 5 new battleships, and 18 new cruisers or destroyers to sea. One of the many benefits of being us. We have tremendous amounts of natural resources and the human element, where Japan does not, especially with the way they fight. This is going to be painfully obvious fairly soon. Japan, on the other hand, has lost 38 ships, suffered 30,000 casualties, and has had 800 planes shot down. Now, what does that mean, 800 planes shot down? They don't have their pilots anymore. Those pilots that would be used to train new generations of pilots are not there. That will be painfully obvious when we talk about the Marianas in just a minute. What did they send to sea? Nothing. What they start the war with against us in 1941 is all that they have to finish the war with. That is why Yamamoto wanted that knockout punch so early in the war. Their entire Navy consists of 12 carriers, 9 battleships, 6 light cruisers, and destroyers. That's what they have left. Now, there are 2 competing plans for how to deal with Japan. One comes from General Douglas MacArthur, who's the commander of the Army, and he is in Australia. And he wants to come from Australia to New Guinea to the Philippines into Japan. The second is in Hawaii, Admiral Chester Nimitz. Nimitz is the commander of the Navy. He wants to come in through the island chains, the Gilberts, the Marshalls, the Marianas, into the Philippines, and then up to Japan. At first, MacArthur's plan wins, and the resources are dispatched to provide him with what he needs. However, not long after that, they realize, hey, we've got more resources than we know what to do with in the Pacific. Let's go ahead and let Nimitz do the same thing. So Nimitz is given permission to launch his assault as well. So we're going to talk, and the title will change as to whose it is, whose assault. Now, on the test, I'm not going to ask a question. But that's just for record keeping on your part. So the first one we're going to talk about is MacArthur. And MacArthur's first attack is going to be off the coast of New Guinea, and it is the Battle of the Bismarck Sea. It occurs March 2nd through 4th, 1943. At the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, the United States is going to make up for one of the early shortages that they have, and that is quality torpedoes. Torpedoes, for whatever reason, the United States is never able to really get to work as great as they would like. However, to make up for this, the Navy bombers are going to come up with a new method of delivering bombs. In the old days, you come down here like this and you drop a bomb, a dive bomber, and you've got your ship. Okay? There's your ship. We're going to make it old sailing ship because it's easier to draw than a battleship. And so you come down and you hit. Well, but the way you attacked is you came down from the sky and you tried to hit it lengthwise. Very difficult to do. If you missed, you just wasted a torpedo. What they decide that they can do instead is if they attack it, broadside like this, you have a much bigger target. And in order to do that, the planes will come in shorter and then above the water and then drop their bombs. And if they do it correctly, the bomb will skip its way into its target. How many guys have skipped a rock? Never skipped a rock in your life? I'm ashamed of you. Okay. Drought hasn't been that bad, that long. You can't find any water. Take a rock and we do boom, 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 boom. Same thing. You skip the rock and it goes over and it hits and it is extremely successful, this skip bomb. As a result, 18,000 Japanese reinforcement transports are sunk. When they are sunk, they also lose 3,000 soldiers. 3,000 soldiers that the Japanese cannot afford to lose. As a result, Japan is going to engage in a new form of strategy. See, after the Battle of Midway, they will never be on the offense again. After the Battle of Midway, they will forever, for the remainder of the war, be on defense. What they do is they come up with a policy of no longer supplying territories, islands that are currently under siege. So you have all these areas that are Japanese islands. And the United States shows up. Japan won't resupply them. So what the United States does is they realize that that's what's going on. So instead of going at when this one falls, instead of going to this one, they're going to go to this one. Because what happens now? They can't get around. So then we leapfrog over them. And then when the islands that we jumped over are nice and worn out, hungry and starving because they don't have any supplies and very weak, then we go in and take them over. Works out wonderful. Now, in the middle of 1943, we get an excellent opportunity. Remember, we're reading the Japanese naval codes that they are sending out. We know what they are planning. They don't know it. However, we discover that Admiral Yamamoto, the architect and planner and admiral in command of Pearl Harbor, is planning on flying to a Japanese base in the Pacific. As a result, this is too good of a target for us not to get. So we dispatch planes to where he is and shoot him down. So I know you're looking at me like, why would we do that?
No, because I'm trying to grasp what you're saying.
We took out the guy who planned Pearl Harbor. Kind of like how we took out Bin Laden, who planned 9/11.
Yeah.
Same type of thing. All right? One's a military man, the other one is not. Sayonara Yamamoto. Sayonara is not his first name. Sayonara is Japanese for hasta la vista. See you later. This completely dispirits the Japanese people. Japanese soldiers, I should say. People don't know anything about it. In regards to Nimitz, at the Battle of the Gilbert Island, between November 20th and 24th, 2 islands are going to be engaged, and the Gilbert Islands are right here, the edge of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. And at the Battle of Macon, on November 20th through 24th, 1943, Japanese air power is made irrelevant by the introduction of the F-6 Hellcat. This is the first plane that is designed to go head-to-head with the Japanese Zero. It can outturn, it can outclimb. It is to the Pacific theater what the Mustang was to the European theater. Macon falls. At the Battle of Tarawa, the Japanese launch a night assault against the USS Enterprise. The carrier. No, not the NCC 1701 Enterprise there, Jason. That would be no contest. Yes. And we're talking about the USS Enterprise. However, they do not seem to realize that we have something that they do not, and that is radar. When you attack at night, you usually have the advantage if you are attacking. But for the Japanese, they learn out the hard way that if you don't have radar, you don't even have to see them. You just point your aircraft, anti-aircraft guns into the air and aim for where the radar says that they're at that height, and boom, shoot them down. And this is the first successful night engagement. Last time we talked about the USS Lexington, the one at Corpus Christi. This is the first time she sees action. She's at Tarawa. She takes a Japanese plane to her It's called the island, the superstructure that's actually above the flight deck. And if you go and see it, they actually show where it hit. Now, at the Battle of the Philippine Sea, June 15th, 1943. Now what we're doing is we're getting closer and closer. We've gone Gilbert, we've gone Marshall, Philippine Sea now. That's how close we're at. We're right there. On June 15th, 1943, the Marianas Turkey Shoot occurs. Marianas Turkey Shoot. At this battle, for the first time, a spotter sees more planes, Japanese planes, heading towards American forces than he has ever counted before. And he sends the condition very red over the radio. The Japanese are flying over 300 planes to try to attack American forces. The United States sends up planes to engage them. At the end of the battle, Japan loses 3 carriers, 2 subs, and 300 planes. It's called the Marianas Turkey Shoot because it's like a turkey shoot. They just kind of sat there and let themselves be shot. Now, anytime you want to see something like that, you see 300 lost, the question should be, how many did we lose?
How many did we lose?
17 planes. Now why? Now why? Why is this like this? The last class said because of the Hellcat. To an extent, but there's something behind the Hellcat that makes the Hellcat more formidable. Was it? Experienced pilots that have not been shot down at. By this point in 43, Japan is hard-pressed to find pilots to go up and stand against the Allied forces and survive. This battle is a win for the United States. Japan reports it to the Emperor as a tremendous victory for themselves. It's Japan. Now, we come to, for many of you who've been with me 2 semesters, come to the end of something that I have talked quite a bit about throughout the course of the semester, of course, of both semesters. That is battleships. I love battleships. You got to have me for 2 semesters know this. From wooden to ironclads to steel. We now come to the last battleship battle that there will ever be. That is the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Now, the United States has progressed with MacArthur's campaign close enough to the Philippines that they can attack and take the Philippines back. MacArthur, remember when he left, made the famous statement, "I shall return." Well, he's been very confident about his chances of returning, and he is determined to do so. The Navy at the Battle of Leyte Gulf is under the command of Admiral Bull Halsey. At this battle, Japan, realizing that if they lose the Philippine Islands, will lose the tremendous oil reserves that are associated, commit basically the last of their navy to an all-out, last-ditch effort to try to defeat the Americans. Right. How do I know this? Because they send for the first time the 2 ships that they've been keeping in reserve, the Nagato and the Musashi. These are super battleships. They are bigger than the Bismarck. They are bigger than anything the United States has. They have 18-inch cannons on them that were never fired in anger. When they were test fired, people who stood on deck when they were test fired would find their clothing ripped off by the air pressure. It was that powerful of a ship. 18-inch cannon. This is also the battle that you have heard of since you were little boys and girls. You may not realize it, but when I say this word, you'll be like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Well, this is where it starts. This is where Japan has no other use for its soldiers, for its pilots, other than to tell them to take off, find the plane, dive into the plane, give your life for the Emperor. This is where the kamikaze debuts. Kamikaze debuts at the Battle of Leyte Gulf. At this battle, it is known as the last battleship battle for a reason. It is a monster. I'm not expecting you to know these on the test, but I am expecting you to, as good citizens of the United States, to remember it until the day you die. Alright? Japan has 1 fleet carrier, 3 light carriers, 2 battleships, the Nagato, the Musashi, 7 battleships, 14 heavy cruisers, 6 cruisers, 35 destroyers, 300 planes. The United States has 8 fleet carriers, 8 light carriers, 18 escort ships, 12 battleships, 24 cruisers, 141 destroyers, numerous PT boats, and 1,500 planes. It is an epic battle. This is the last battleship battle. The only battleship that is still in service is United States Missouri, and it is an honorary service, kind of like the Arizona and the Constitution. The Arizona, she's not going anywhere. The Constitution, the one I'm talking about, is one of the first frigates that was made, that was wooden. I don't think she would stand up against a carrier today. Take the battle. In this battle, a young captain by the name of John Fitzgerald Kennedy is pilot of a patrol torpedo boat 109. In this battle, he finds himself surrounded in fog. Because of the way the PT-109 is built, or the PT boats are built, and it is a diesel engine, it has to be shifted into neutral so you can actually be able to hear anything, because you obviously can't see because he is in a fog bank. As soon as he shifts it into neutral, it takes a while to shift it out of neutral. A Japanese destroyer comes out of nowhere and crushes his ship. He jumps overboard and most of his crew is killed. One of his friends is bleeding, slowly bleeding to death, and he pulls his friend on his back and swims to where he hopes shore is. As he is swimming, he feels his friend pulling back on him a little bit. He thinks that's kind of odd. Only later does he realize that it wasn't his friend pulling back on him, it was the shark that was eating his friend. Because the blood in the water from his friend had attracted the shark, and his friend had died. Because of his injuries that he suffers in this war, in this battle, he is going to live in pain the rest of his life. He's going to, in addition to other issues we'll talk about later, he's going to be forced to wear a steel back brace the rest of his life. And if you ever know anything about his assassination, you know that one thing that people point out all the time is that there's no way he was shot once because of all of the damage that was done. Well, if you're wearing a steel back brace and a bullet hits it, what's it going to do? Ricochet throughout your body. So, in this battle, the Nagasaki and the Musashi are attacked by a United States sub. The sub sees them coming, and they see him. The captain of the submarine is barely able to fire a full spread of torpedoes before sinking and running for his life. I think it's in Nagasaki, it's Nagata. And what happens here, all these Japanese words. And what happens is he doesn't know what occurs, but of those torpedoes that he launched, 2 of them hit the Nagato and 1 the Musashi. Sink both of the battleships without firing a shot. At the end of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the United States wins. Japan suffers 10,000 dead, loses 1 fleet carrier, loses 3 light carriers, 2 super battleships, 1 battleship, 8 cruisers, and 12 destroyers. The United States, 1,500 dead, 1 carrier, the USS Hornet, which you will remember from Doolittle fame, 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, 1 escort. In the end, MacArthur is able to go ashore. He sends his personal photographers ashore first. so they can photograph it from the shore. And standing on the beachhead saying that, "Oh, I have returned." Of course, it's a very famous picture. Of course it is. He chose it himself.
They have a statue.
I believe so, yes. It's kind of funny if you actually look at it from somebody who is not his photographer, because it looks like he's storming the beach. But then you see, like, after it was taken, and the beach is like about this big. And he's like standing right, there's a cliff right next to him, and he's talking to somebody like this. The picture's already been taken, one that everybody knows. All right, so this brings us to the introduction of a new weapon, and that is the B-29 bomber. The B-29 Super Fortress. Did any of you guys go see Fifi when she was here? She was here last semester. The last surviving B-29. She was at Easterwood Airport. Go see her. Saw her fly. It's pretty. You could have actually paid like $500 and they take you up in it. That'd be really neat. Yeah. I think I can find better ways to spend $500, but because the Philippines fall, we now, thanks to the B-29 superior range, we can fly, hit Japan, and return back to the Philippines. And that's exactly what we decided to do. We decided we were going to go and we were going to attack Tokyo for the first time and let them know that they are in range of our planes. On March 9, 1945, 335 B-29s are launched. Their goal, Tokyo. They fly out in 4 waves. The first wave goes like that, dropping bombs. And they drop napalm. Napalm is a chemical mixture. You can make it yourself. Don't do it, though. Gasoline and Tide detergent will do it. But basically what happens is when it is set aflame, it burns forever. Okay?
Burns the water.
It burns on water. Yes, it will.
What you do is styrofoam. Gasoline styrofoam.
I don't want to hear what you do in your private time. Okay? That's,
But yes, you can. Get this all.
Super soakers can shoot it? That's frightening. Okay. I really don't want to know. You guys scare me. And then the second wave goes through and it firebombs that way. Now, what happens after that is a third wave would be assigned a quadrant to bomb. And the fourth wave would be assigned a quadrant to bomb after it had been divided in half, or in quarters, excuse me. Tokyo had been built for centuries with the one resource that they had in abundance, which was, what? Did you say oil?
I was going to say bamboo.
How do you build something with oil? Wood and bamboo, both of which burn very quickly. Because of the amount of bombs that are dropped, because of the condition of the target, because of the winds, it turns into a firestorm, doing much more damage than the United States ever expected. 100,000 people would lose their lives. 1 million would be rendered homeless. And Japan surrenders. Macy, why are you looking at me that way? Perhaps? No, they do not. I'm sorry. I called it Macy. Casey said by each other. Casey, why'd you look that way? Macy's like, why'd you call? Casey. Okay. I'll just say that the C, the Kenny pronounced the last syllable of. No, they do not surrender. No, any sane person would. A group who is able to inflict this much damage in one assault, killing 100,000 people and changing the fortunes of 1 million, you would think, yes, because they could do this again. No. This was a fluke. This was not something the Army said that could be done again. As a result, the war continues. However, this is something that the United States has gotten a lot of flack for doing it, because they did attack maliciously a civilian target. Of course, that's something that we will make sure that we don't do when we drop them off. Now, the B-29 has a wonderful range. However, they are extremely expensive. They cost about $2 million to build. And that's a lot of money during this time period, especially when we thought there were 335 there that we launched in that assault. 16 didn't come back. As a result, it would be nice if we could have an island close to Japan that we could build an airstrip upon that damaged planes, damaged B-29 super fortresses, could land on the way back from an attack on Japan. As a result, such an island is located, and the video we showed at the beginning of class, the Battle of Iwo Jima, is the target. Iwo Jima is a volcanic island. Basically, what it has is 5 square miles of volcanic ash, a mountain, and an airstrip. That is it. At this battle, the Japanese, realizing that maybe these bonsai charges aren't the best use of our resources, order their men to instead dig in. And the battle becomes a lot more treacherous. What happens at Iwo Jima is our troops go ashore. They encounter very little resistance on the beach, and they move farther inland. They set up their camps on the areas that they believed they had controlled, but then at night they discovered that they had built their camps over tunnel entrances for the Japanese. After Iwo Jima is cleared out, 16 miles of tunnels would be discovered under her surface. For the first time, the United States is going to suffer more casualties in a battle than she takes herself, our Marines. Typically, you suffer 3 to 2. In this one, for every 1 Japanese soldier that we killed, we lost 3. Some form of casualty, death, or injury. Substantial damage here. You know already Iwo Jima because of this picture, the raising of the flag over Iwo Jima. It is the 4 Marines and 1 Navy corpsman on the top of Mount Suribichi who raised this flag. But what you probably don't know is that this is the second time it was raised. The first time it was raised by those individuals, it was raised with a smaller flag, and there wasn't a photographer there. The reason there wasn't a photographer there was because there were people actually dying to raise that flag there, and the photographer wasn't there. However, after it was over, the photographer arranged to have a bigger flag brought up and placed on the top of the mountain. Eventually, March 26, 1945, the last Japanese forces surrender, and Iwo Jima falls. It becomes an area that we use. Now, this brings us to something new in the war. That is the Battle of Okinawa. The Battle of Okinawa. Every battle in the Pacific I have discussed has been an island that Japan had attacked and had taken. It had not been theirs before the war. Okinawa is considered part of Japan by the Japanese people. It is a home island. In order for us to attack, we believe we need to take Okinawa. Right? We begin the assault. It occurs on April 1st, 1945. In this battle, our Marines, as they go ashore, experience some of the bloodiest fighting of the entire war. It's so bloody and it's so disastrous that it is the reason that the United States ultimately makes the decision to drop the bomb. At Okinawa, the Japanese forces use every option they have available against us. If you, men in here, if you were fighting and all of a sudden a woman came running up to you, what would you do? She's crying. Hands are empty and she's running towards you. What would you do? Because you're fighting in a town. You're fighting in her village. What would you do? Try to help her. You try to help her. You probably grab her and throw her to the back, which they did in Europe the entire war. You take her to the back so she can get the assistance she needs. But the problem is the Japanese army had strapped explosives to her and set them off as soon as you got clear. As soon as you got next to her. And killed her and killed numerous of our soldiers. There are reports, Robert Leckie, who was at Guadalcanal, reports in one of his books, in which, at Okinawa, that as the Marines were coming ashore, there was a cliff next to the beach they were landing on, and they could see as they were coming ashore, husbands taking their wives and throwing them into the ocean to their deaths, so that they would not be raped by the evil American GI, taking their children and throwing them off the beach, throwing them off the cliff to be killed on the rocks below. In one very moving scene, still with me today, that I still remember, is a Marine going ashore, sees a mother take her young child, throw him off into the ocean. The child can't swim. The Marine throws off all his gear and dives into the cliff, off the cliff, into the water, and saves the child's life. But so indoctrinated were the people of Japan that they were willing to kill themselves and to be killed by what they thought the United States Marines were going to do to them. Because the Army so controlled the thoughts of the Japanese that when Okinawa falls, it is estimated that to attack the capital of Honshu, the main island here of Japan, it would cost 1 million lives. The United States told the Marines that they were about ready to go in, and the first assault was going to be 100,000 men, and told them to expect 100% casualty. Something had to be done that would render invasion unnecessary. Now, as the Battle of Okinawa is going on, the Japanese are desperate. They have no more planes. They have very little in the way of their navy, nothing that they can stand against anything the United States have. So they take the last of the 3 super battleships, the Yamato, and they load her with explosives, and they turn her into a kamikaze ship, and they sail her at full speed towards the American fleet, hopefully to destroy it. The Yamato is spotted by a group of submarines that are watching for just such an event, and they sink her before she can do any harm. Now, the greater co-prosperity sphere is dead. All that Japan has left is their home island. Looking at a occupying force of 1 million soldiers and a native population that was willing to kill you with a spoon, the United States looked for other options. Back in 1938, before the war actually started, FDR was contacted by Albert Einstein, who wrote him a letter saying, I am concerned with the fact that in the last couple of years there have been no scientific journals that have published any German physics experiments. If you know anything about science, the way that you broadcast your innovations, or any field of any research, is you publish it in scholarly journals. History, we do it. Government, you do it. Psychology, you do it. And that's what you do. You share knowledge. Because nothing is coming from Germany. Prior to Hitler coming into office, they had the leading mind in nuclear physics. Now, nothing. It concerns me because they were theorizing that you could split an atom and harness its power. If Hitler is working on this, it would be disastrous. FDR agrees. He shares his concern with Churchill. Churchill says, yes, we are well aware of this issue. In fact, we have launched an effort to deal with Hitler's quest to make a nuclear bomb. We call it Operation Gunnerside. Operation Gunnerside is a British attempt to deny something that the nuclear fusion process requires, and that is heavy water. If you've ever heard this statement, you need heavy water to do this because it heats up very slowly. Heavy water is H2O2, extra molecule of oxygen attached. It absorbs radiation very quickly. It does not evaporate very quickly, so therefore it is a prime component for the nuclear process. So, what happens is at this time, there was only one place in the world that had a plant that could make heavy water. Well, okay, you say that's not a problem because, just keep it away from Hitler. Problem is, it's in Denmark, which happens to be controlled by Hitler at this time period. So, what happens? And I always kind of think Ian Fleming is one of the guys that they do this. It is the guy that does this. He knows a lot about British spy agents. He wrote all of his accounts and his friends' accounts into a series of novels called James Bond. And Ian Fleming. Yes, you know James Bond. Anybody knows James Bond?
Oh yeah, my dad. That's what he's writing his dissertation on.
James Bond.
Yep.
So what happens here is, in Operation Gunnerside, 3 British commandos are sent into Denmark to blow up this heavy water plant. At the heavy water plant, they are successful. They blow up all capability of Hitler to make new H2O2. 2 of these commandos are killed. 1 survives and stays there. In 1940, Hitler orders the remaining supplies of heavy water to be shipped to Germany for safekeeping. In order to do this, they have to go from to transport all this. It has to come by train. England finds out about this and orders that commando to do something about it. The commando studies the route that they're going to take, and he discovers that it's a train track they're going to go down until it gets to a humongous lake called Lake Tinejau. This lake is extremely deep, and there's no way anything that is at the bottom of it would ever be recovered. So what he does is he waits until the train gets here, boards a ferry to take it across, and then get back on the train again. And he sets on. Here's a ferry. Will be a very bad ferry drawing here. Then you've got the train car right here, and he sets an explosive right here on the back of it, and then another explosive right here. And when they are over the deepest part of Lake Tinejau, he sets this explosive off. And what it does is it shoots the back end of the train ferry into the air. At the same time, the gate is blown off here. So what happens? It's pointing down, and then the train car rolls to the bottom of Lake Tinejau.
Is that after they got
That's after they got the equipment, yes. Yeah. So, any chance after this, in 1940, that Hitler would get the nuclear bomb, 1941, to get the nuclear bomb is done. He's not going to be able to do it. So, the United States had begun their own process on building a nuclear warhead, and it had begun under the football field at the University of Chicago, in an old, out-of-the-way facility, the squash room. You know, the way they play squash, it's kind of like racquetball, but not. You know, they had the Manhattan Project was created. The Manhattan Project was designed to split the atom, figure out a way to do it. They were successful, and on July 16, 1945, Manhattan Project detonated their first nuclear bomb, atomic bomb, in the New Mexican desert. Now, obviously, when it is exploded, the war in Europe is already over. Now, as you'll see when we get a little bit further, just because the war in Europe is already over doesn't mean that the Russians have entered into the war against Japan. In fact, things are going kind of the opposite way. See, Truman is not FDR. Truman was not willing to deal with Stalin as a means to an end as FDR was. Truman was a vicious anti-communist, and he hated Stalin, and Stalin knew it. As a result, they didn't get along. When news of the successful detonation of the atomic bomb reaches Truman, he leans over to tell Stalin, the United States now has a bomb of immense power. Stalin looks at him and says, well, then you better only use it against the United States now, against Japan now, shouldn't you? Now, this didn't surprise Stalin that we had it. He had his own spies, and their spies would steal our technology so that they could create their own nuclear bomb when we get into the Cold War. On August 4th, 1945, August 4th, 1945, Truman issues an ultimatum to Japan. This ultimatum says, surrender or face destruction. What does Japan do?
Face destruction.
Japan says, you don't know. You're just talking. You're talking. As a result, 2 days later, Truman orders the dropping of first atomic bomb on Japan. The target of Hiroshima is chosen in that the exact target is the Mitsubishi factory. The Mitsubishi factory is the maker of all Japanese Zeros. By hitting that target, we are hitting a military site. August 6, 1945, 8 a.m. Colonel Paul Tibbets, flying the B-29 Enola Gay, drops the Little Boy. It is set for explosion above ground so that it would not impact the maximum dispersal, and it explodes, killing 120,000 people instantly. They are vaporized. Another 60,000 will die due to radiation poisoning. Now, the United States gets a lot of grief in the ground on the basis that this was the end of the war. Japan ultimately would have surrendered, especially with what the Soviets were getting ready to do. Well, what were the Soviets getting ready to do? As soon as we dropped the bomb, the Soviets attacked Japan because they realized that Japan's going to surrender, and if they want to get anything, they need to get it now. So they break the non-aggression pact and start attacking. They're going to be very successful because by the time the war actually comes to an end, they are in Korea. They are very quick in rolling up Japanese forces. When the Japanese high command loses any form of communication with Hiroshima, they send up a plane to try to see what has happened. Maybe they lost power, what have you. The person flying over Hiroshima radios back and says, it looks like the entire city has been destroyed. Go back and look at the picture there. You can see, if you've ever seen, this is a bad picture because it's taken at the time. Everything is level. Everything is completely destroyed. This was an observatory right here that is still there. It's been turned into the Japanese War Museum there. Basically, not a museum, a memorial. They don't tend, the Japanese do not talk much about World War II. Now, the Japanese believe that the United States has dropped every single bomb in its inventory. Only way that could happen, that much devastation could happen. So they believe that the United States overplayed its hand, that they dropped all their weapons in a last-ditch effort to get them to surrender, and if they do not surrender, then they will be able to go and take back everything as beforehand. So they do not surrender. 3 days later, August 9th, 1945, Truman orders another bomb drop. Thankfully, this is it. Why thankfully this is it? Because we only had two. Now, Nagasaki, the port city of Nagasaki is chosen. Nagasaki is different than Hiroshima in the grounds that the devastation is not going to be as great because it is a port. Much of the destruction of the blast waves is going to be sent out to sea, and on the other side of it, the inland side, it is surrounded by cliffs. So it is much of the damage is contained. Instead of 120,000, 80,000 are going to die in the explosion. Now, breaking with tradition, 3 days later, the Emperor, 5 days later, the Emperor is going to speak to the Japanese people and tell them that they are surrendering, that the war is lost because the United States can do so much damage, and that it is in the best interest for Japan to surrender. Now, while he's doing this radio broadcast, a group of army ultranationalists break into the Emperor's palace and try to assassinate him to prevent this from occurring. They are captured, and the Emperor is able to do this. Now, in Japanese harbor,
Is this why the ship is...
Oh, yeah, the Missouri, yes. Yes. On 14th, victory over Japan is declared. VJ Day is celebrated. Times Square, you've seen this picture, I know you have, because you are alive. This picture is a spontaneous parade that broke out of the servicemen that were there, the sailors. You would think he knows her. He does not. She doesn't know him. After they did this kiss, and they never saw each other again. About 5-10 years ago, maybe now, they were tracked down. I believe the man had died, and the woman admits that, yes, this guy just came up to her, gave her this kiss, and the rest is history. The official surrender of Japan would be signed on September 2nd, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri. Today, the USS Missouri is the last battleship that we have on active duty. She is moored in Pearl Harbor, guarding her sister, the Arizona. So the war's over. Now what? You say that a lot. The war's over. Now what? Brent, what?
Since they don't like Russian, talk about when drive a train from Germany to Russia.
Yes. Patton would get in trouble. He got in trouble for a lot of things. Patton, at a conference with Russians afterwards, would make the comment that now that the Germans had been defeated, it was only right for the United States, since they were there, and he wanted them to. He said, we need to attack them because we're the strongest we are right now, and they're the weakest they are. We need to continue fighting them and defeat them. Defeat the Russians. How would history have looked 50 years down the line that had occurred. Because we could have done it.
U.S. modified.
Well, when we've had the Cold War, would the Cold War have been a hot war that lasted the same amount of time? So remember, when the big three met in Yalta, it was a completely different conference. FDR, Churchill, and Stalin meeting at Yalta, it has a different intent, and that is what? To address what is post-war Europe going to look like. And one of the things they set the grounds for was a replacement to the League of Nations. This replacement to the League of Nations is known as the United Nations, of which the United States realizes it is going to have to be a very big partner. See, any belief that the United States should return to isolationism after World War II is so small that it is not even worth mentioning. Prior to World War I, for the United States to be invaded, attacked, what have you, you would have to have a ship sail up to the coast, attack it, and then disembark troops. Now, thanks to technology, you could have a plane fly across the ocean, drop off paratroopers, and invade. Isolationism isn't an option after World War II. The United States is going to take a very active role in enforcing this peace. And they've been successful. How many major wars have we, how many world wars have we had since 1945? Zero. You have little skirmishes in Vietnam, Korea, but nothing of the scale of World War II. Now, in April of 1945, delegates from across the world are going to meet in San Francisco to deal with and write what is going to become the United Nations Charter. This is going to be the equivalent of the Constitution of the United States, except for a world organization of the United Nations. The United Nations is divided up into three different groups. Much like our government has three different branches, it has three different branches as well. The first is the General Assembly, in which all nations are recognized and are represented. Second is the Security Council, of which 11 members are on it. The Security Council deals with any request of use of force, anything involving any form of military intervention. Has 11 total members, 5 of which will never be replaced. That is the United States, Russia, Great Britain, China, and France. Stalin was furious that France was included because he said, what have they done? They haven't done anything to deserve a seat at the table. But it was Truman's desire that this would occur. Now, the day-to-day operations of the UN is going to be overseen by the Secretariat. The Secretariat is the equivalent of the President. Remember, after World War I was over, one of the major problems that we faced was what to do with all these soldiers that we just demobilized. What happens now, after World War II, reflects that we learned a lot from what happened in World War I. Remember, after World War I, you had the bonus army, you had Coxey's army, you had all these problems that resulted from our troops not having really any help coming back and reintegrating into society. By July 1946, our army, which had been upwards of 4 million, comes down to 1.5. Our Navy is less than. Congress, to help our returning soldiers, passes the GI Bill of Rights for June 44, to which $20 a week is given in unemployment insurance, in which probably the equivalent today of about $200 a week, so it's livable. You are provided up to $2,000 for home purchases. Still something that they allow today. My brother-in-law was in the Navy, and when he got out, he got, I want to say, up to $10,000 through the VA for his home. And then $500 a year for college was provided. You go into the military, you get to qualify for the GI Bill, and up to, I want to say, 10 grand a year as well. That's one of the things I always run into. People always say, well, college is too expensive. No, it's not. Go join the military. I promise when you come out, you will be a better student than when you went in. I promise you. One of the major problems with the peace happens to do with a guy by the name of Stalin. He's not such a nice guy. He's not swell. As a result, Stalin not being swell, we have a problem. At the Potsdam Conference, which is handling the end of war, what is the punishment for Germany? What is the punishment for Japan? There happens to be a breakdown in agreement. Well, who do you think it would be with? Do you think it would be between Germany not wanting to deal with what we're going to say to them? No, it's Stalin not being happy with what the United States and the Allies want to do. As a result, he closes off Berlin to any form of transportation by any allies. Now, Berlin is an occupied city. It is an occupied city in an occupied portion of Germany. At the end of the war, Germany is going to be partitioned, here's Germany as a whole, in 4 different aspects. You have a French section, a British section, an American section, and a Russian section. Have you ever heard the phrase East Germany? This is what we're talking about right here. Okay. Berlin itself is divided amongst these 4 powers as well. By the time that the Cold War escalates, all of the British and French area is pretty much just going to be controlled by Americans because we're the ones who have the wherewithal to stand toe-to-toe with the Russians. But starting in 1948, Stalin closes all forms of supplies or any transportation into Berlin. So our troops that are stationed there do not have the method of survival. Now, what happens is from 48 to 49, we have the Berlin airlift, in which the United States will resupply our troops by dropping them from planes into Berlin. Eventually, Stalin is going to relent and let us supply our troops. But it was him throwing a fit. And this is my way or the highway. Remember when we were talking about China. China, when the war starts, was fighting its own civil war between communists under Mao Zedong and the Republic forces under Chiang Kai-shek. When Japan invades, the 2 Chinese forces kind of declare themselves at a truce and say, we won't fight each other until the Japanese are defeated, and then we'll start up again. Well, as soon as the Japanese are defeated, Mao Zedong had already laid plans to begin attacking the Republic Chinese again, and does so. And by 48, drives them off of the mainland of China to Taiwan, this little island right here, where the Republic of China still exists today. The communist China that you're familiar with is Tiananmen Square, all that stuff, is the People's Republic of China. Anytime you see the people, word people in front of it, it's communist. Okay? So the People's Republic of China is China as you know it today. China that was part of the Allies is now off the coast of Taiwan. Both of them declare each other an insurrectionist, but nobody shoots at each other anymore. Now what happens here is this causes a lot of concern because as soon as China takes over this area, nations on either side of it begin to fall to communism as well. And this lends itself to what is known as the domino effect. If you take dominoes and you stack them end on end and you push one down, what happens? They all fall. And if you look at what is happening on the map to the United States and the Allies, is as these nations go communist, the ones around them go communist, and it proceeds outward, and it would continue to fall like dominoes. This is going to color our thought process for the rest of the Cold War. Don't believe me? Look at March 1947. Remember, when the Russians were invading, they were attacking Germany, what were they doing in the island, the nations that they freed? What were they doing? They're setting up puppet governments that were communist against the wishes of the people who lived there. Now, Churchill told Eisenhower, you got to do something about this. Eisenhower said, I'm not worried about that. Hitler's my target. And we'll deal with that later. So what happens is, in March 1947, Greece erupts into civil war between communists and free soldiers. Problem is Russia is supplying the communist Greeks insurrectionists with weaponry. As a result, Truman issues the Truman Doctrine, which says that any nation that is combating communism will have the financial resources of the United States to draw upon. We will fight communism in all its forms, but we were only going to provide you the method to do it. This is why it's a Cold War. A hot war would be me being mad at Patrick and he and I fighting. Okay? That's him and I directly. A Cold War would be his best friend and my best friend fighting each other on no other grounds than he and I can't fight each other because it's too great of repercussions. Especially when Russia gets the bomb and you have two nuclear powers, you don't want them fighting because then that becomes an option. Now, realizing that after World War I, one of the major faults, or one of the major reasons that Italy and Germany went fascist was that it was the only way perceived at the time to get their economy jump-started again. The United States is going to introduce the Marshall Plan, introduced by George Marshall, Truman's Secretary of State, in April of 1948. And what this does is it creates a United States-financed European recovery program, which will provide $5 billion to help get the war-torn European nations back on their feet. Because if they have a strong economy, if your economy is strong, your people are happy. If your people are happy, somebody comes up to you and says, hey, let's overthrow your government. They're going to be like, no, I'm too busy making money. But you have to have that going on. And as a result, this is our plan, the Marshall Plan, to provide financial assistance to get the war-torn European nations back on their feet so they don't go communist. That's a lot. Have a good weekend.